All right, and we're live. Hello, YouTube. Got Lee back. This is for Heavy Art Talk episode 3, and I have my illustrious guest here, Caroline Harrison.
Pun intended.
Yeah. But just for everybody, I'm going to do a quick bio. And in terms of this interview, we'll keep it pretty casual, conversational, and we'll start with just some questions, and we'll wrap up with showing some artwork and doing a little bit of how were these different pieces created. So a little bit about Caroline. She's an artist and illustrator based out of New York. She's worked with a number of artists such as Pig Destroyer, Kool Keith, Inner Arma, Ken Mode, Pyrrhon, Chat Pile, Portrayal of Guilt, Gigan. And in terms of her approach, nobody likes to be labeled, but I think that this bio keeps it pretty broad. Her drive is to examine and understand experiences with alienation, resilience, anxiety, all the fun emotions. And her horror informs her choices for repulsive and disquieting objects, while also balancing that with beauty. Her drawings leverage the medium's immediacy, its physicality, and its foundational relationship to our introductory experiences with art to create meaningful connections with the viewer. Reads like a resume,
Yeah, those bios are always kind of torturous to write. So
I say it's pretty accurate, though.
You try and get everything in all at once, and I definitely need to revisit it because it's been like 3 or 4 years since I wrote that.
Yeah. Well, how besides maybe some of the word choices, would you change your mission statement at all?
No, probably not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how's your week been?
It's been all right. It's been, just kind of status quo, artist with a day job kind of week. So had the day job, tried to make time for stuff in the evenings, got my studio time in yesterday, gonna go again later. So, and I've got tomorrow off. So that part's really nice.
Oh, for President's Day, right?
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things about my practice is the stuff that I do, I don't know that I could make New York rent doing this or have things like health insurance. So I have a day job that allows me to not worry about supporting myself with my work, which...
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I'm in the same type of bucket, albeit you have way more commissions than I do, but in the sense of like...
Give it time.
Trying to balance, the day job perks with also the pain, but then also it does allow you a little bit more freedom and autonomy when you do have that smaller amount of spare time. But
yeah, well, and it really is like there are drawbacks because obviously, like, I wish I was spending more time drawing.
Yeah.
And my current practice doesn't allow for a lot of space for what I would describe as like play, which I think is really important to developing your work, like just having the space and the freedom to do stuff that's not like for a purpose.
Totally.
But also I don't have to worry about making something that's palatable enough that it will sell. So
right. I know what you mean.
And so I can take clients that are not like, So
I've noticed a lot of your clients, not all of them, but a lot of them are, if I'm not mistaken, in New York and kind of like the Northeast. How do you think that kind of came into play? Like, is there a particular band you started working with and that kind of allowed you to branch out?
Yeah. So that's actually pretty much exactly what it is. I'm absolutely terrible at self-promotion. I don't find it a comfortable process. I don't like doing it. And I am, when it comes to like meeting people, like I can converse with somebody, but I'm like actually fairly shy. I don't like going up to people. I like, even if I know somebody, I like am still like a little bit hesitant about like saying hi to them because I'm like, I don't want to bother you. But so a lot of the work that I started doing work for Pyrrhon. Mm-hmm. They're based in New York. The reason that I know them is because I've actually been in like a long-term relationship with the vocalist since like right before the band's inception.
Nice.
So like we've sort of like artistically kind of grown up alongside each other in a really fun way. But so I was doing work for them because they were kind of like the only band where like I had an in, but also it felt like simpatico, I guess, as far as our sort of shared artistic
Totally
kind of vision. And then people just started being like, oh, who did your art to Pyrrhon? And they'd be like, oh, well, Caroline. So you kind of meet people that way. And then like the internet kind of helps expose people to your work. Like I know Instagram is a fucking garbage fire, but I've like encountered a lot of people that way. Like I don't know, Portrayal of Guilt, who you mentioned, they're based in Austin. And they found me through Instagram. SunnO found me through Instagram also. Chat pile, I just started messaging in like early 2020 before the pandemic hit, being like, please, if you guys play New York, like let me know and I would love to help set that up. So yeah, I don't know. It's a small world kind of thing. And I think the Northeast is simply just because that's where a lot of people I know are based. But I mean, arguably like Inner Arma is Mid-Atlantic. I've worked with Gouache, who is sort of Nashville. So yeah.
Closer to my neck of the woods then.
Yeah.
No, that's really neat.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a small world, even though it's like, you know, New York is like the biggest small town. It's funny in that respect.
Yeah, I imagine Brooklyn especially is kind of that way. Very artistic place from what I understand. I've never been, but my wife just recently went.
Yeah, I mean, also it's a huge place. Like when you're talking about Brooklyn, you know, it can take you over an hour to get end to end.
Wow.
Like it's not like Brooklyn is the size of a lot of major metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
Queens is even bigger, I think, technically. No. Brooklyn is the largest, I think, geographically, but Queens is close. And if I'm wrong, it's fine. Somebody will tell me.
Don't worry, I don't get enough views currently for anybody to even correct you, so we're going to be fine. I'll work my way
up. Hell yeah.
But
this is a safe space.
Yeah. So in terms of like just living in, you know, New York and stuff, do you pretty much just stay to your neighborhood? I mean, I guess there is like the subway, but is that pretty common?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like everywhere in New York is going to take me like 40 minutes to get to, basically. I really love my neighborhood. I've been in this part of Queens for coming up on 9 years, which is like unheard of in New York terms. But we like lucked into an apartment that we could tolerate at a value that was like below market value. And so we've just kind of like held on to it with white knuckles.
Kind of grandfathered into a reasonable rate.
Basically. I do stuff that would be staying local to New York, but that's because there's just so much stuff here. The pace of living can get relentless as far as like stuff that happens, but also kind of what else is the point of living here if you don't take advantage of the stuff that happens? So
right, that's a really good point. You want to just live there and be a complete hermit.
Well, that's the struggle, is that like I sort of am like that. Unless it's like I'm really bad at making plans with people. I am a hermit, but I'm a hermit that goes places, if that makes sense. I like go places on my own a lot. No, I just kind of like
I'm pretty similar in a lot of ways. What was I going to say? I was just kind of like curious. So obviously most of your commissions, not all of them though, are with metal bands. Is that your primary listing habits, or do you listen kind of all over the map?
Not really. I'm definitely a little bit all over the map. The metal thing is kind of incidental because I think there's a lot of kind of similar artistic visions in metal. Like these are people who don't really shy away from like more intense kind of brutal things, obviously. So it was a place where a lot of my artistic sensibilities just sort of lined up. with kind of a lot of what they are trying to accomplish artistically. Don't get me wrong, like I do go to a lot of metal shows. I listen to metal, but a lot of the stuff that I listen to is also like sad folk music, like gothy synthy bullshit. Like I definitely, a lot of like indie rock. I don't know. I kind of cut my teeth on like MP3 blogs during sort of like the aughts indie rock kind of thing.
I have a similar kind of taste too. Like kind of that mid to late 2000s had a lot of really good indie rock that I'm kind of still stuck with. Like I still am Animal Collective fan, and all those kind of offshoots, and I don't know, I like trying to find those kind of like hidden bands in there too. TV on the radio, stuff kind of like that.
And it's fun because like a lot of the metal that I've ended up sort of exposed to and listening to, and like at this point, just because it is such a small world that I get to like see people that I know make, is this really intense blend where it doesn't necessarily fit in any one subgenre.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I loved, I guess like last year for me, the real standout like metal record is the Avaturn record.
I don't know if I heard that.
It's spelled Aevitrne, but it's members of this band that used to share a practice space with Pyrrhon, actually, Flourishing.
Okay.
In sort of their new iteration, they also have Ian from Castavet plays drums.
Okay.
Sam from Artificial Brain joined on bass, and you know, small world up here. So like we've known Sam for a while, and like Garrett and Eric from Flourishing also for a while. Just so it was one of those things where I wasn't expecting to like the album quite as much as I did, and then I was just like kind of walloped in the face by how very intense and good it was.
It's always nice when you make friends with people, then you also like their art. Keeps it not awkward, you know?
Yeah, well, and I think also, yeah, exactly. It keeps it not awkward, because I think if you have friends where you don't like their art, it ends up like being sort of a fundamental point where like there's something blocking that connection.
Yeah. You can't be completely honest all the time.
Or it's somebody where you don't love their art and you can be completely honest and they're totally cool with it. And then like, that's actually like a different.
That's good character. And
yeah, I mean, that's good character. And you like hold the fuck on to those people. Like there are definitely people who are in bands where I'm like, I don't care about your band, but you're delightful. And like, we're able to sort of like talk on that level where like, oh, but do you like listen? I'm like, I actually don't really listen, but like, they're cool. And I respect what they're doing. I don't have to like it, but it's easier if you respect what they're doing.
No, I'm totally with you. I actually just saw Artificial Brain, not last week, but the week before, because they're doing like a tour up the East Coast. So yeah, I saw them in Atlanta. It's a good show.
Yeah, they're fun.
They went on a little late, so I had like work the next morning, so I wish I was able to stay a little longer, but I did dip out a little early.
Yeah. Well, and they're currently, I think the tour lineup for this one, I was jokingly referring to them being like a Lego set. Because they like are able to swap out live members because of just the way that their musicianship works, I guess. That like, I don't know. I think the bassist is this for the tour is a guy named Cotter, and not Sam, because I think Sam probably had work or something that he couldn't. I don't know. I know that Sam is not on tour, but
yeah. And then the vocalist, I don't know his name, but he was,
well, the vocalist,
he's not Will Smith, basically.
Yeah, well, Will is no longer in the band. Right. And Mike from Arma has been doing live dates for them, but they've also been doing live stuff with Paulo, who's in Miasmatic Necrosis and a bunch of other stuff.
It wasn't him because I saw them.
Yeah. I know who it is, and I feel really bad because I'm blanking on his name, but he's based in Richmond. He was really nice.
Yeah, he did a really good job.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're fun.
Back to you. So tell me a little bit about your artistic journey, maybe even starting when you were, a kid.
Yeah, I think you and Lucas talked about this a little bit too. It's not so much like when did you start drawing, but like why didn't you stop is sort of the
Okay,
question.
good.
Because like everybody draws when they're little, like we all do. Like you have crayons and markers and colored pencils, and you're like drawing your own little worlds or whatever. But then I
Yeah.
think at some point there's this idea that you have to be good at it to be allowed to keep doing it, which is horse shit for the record. But I had enough of a natural aptitude that people encouraged me, which I actually get a little salty about because then I think about like all the people who don't get encouragement and then
Right, who
just
could have
stop
been?
and what kind of voices do we lose because we don't have like a good arts education system in place. But yeah, so I just was, I was drawing. I was part of what I really loved doing in school. And I was really lucky because my parents are both teachers, and they teach in some really good private schools in the Boston area. So I got to go to a couple of schools that actually had really good arts programs as part of them. Like my elementary school, once you got into the middle school, had these like arts electives you could take, and they were like crazy niche stuff. So like I like made shaker boxes in a wood shop. I made like an Adirondack chair.
Wow.
I had like an embroidery class that I took once. Like I got to do like raku pottery when I was like 12. And then when I got to high school, like the arts faculty were just like so wonderful and nice and welcoming and encouraging. So got to kind of like make my niche that way. But I
Very
was
cool.
also like a big dork who was like interested in school. So
Yeah, I'm the same way.
yeah, exactly. So it was one of those things where like when it was when it was time to look at colleges, and I was lucky enough to be able to like go to college. My parents were very and I think rightly, my parents were like, you need to go somewhere that's also going to be academically challenging because otherwise you're going to be fucking bored.
Right.
So I did look at art schools, but I, instead of going to art school, went to a college where I knew that they had a good undergraduate art program, but also really good academics. So it meant that I was able to do things like minor in something called science, technology, and society, which was basically like a humanities study of science and like the history and sociology of science and tech.
Okay.
So some real nerd shit that was really fun.
I mean, I'm with you. I didn't get an art degree, but I got a business degree, and then I did end up getting my MBA as well.
Yeah.
So I'm with you in terms of, I don't want to go on a giant rant, but I do think some people kind of, there was a trend. I don't see it as much anymore. Where people were just kind of discounting like getting an education. And I'm not personally on that.
Well, and it's not that I think, and this is something I could go on about, so I will like cut myself off at a certain point because like there's no way to make me screamingly mad as fast as like asking me to talk about like education and equity and like the way that we value or don't value education. Right. But I think like the main issue I think at this point with this like what's the point of getting a degree, it's like we've created this mentality where like everybody needs to go into the workforce to do something that has been deemed like valuable or whatever. And so we're prioritizing workforce stuff. We're not just like letting people learn for the sake of learning. And we're not encouraging people to like broaden their minds and like expand their horizons and think about things in a way that maybe they hadn't before, or like stretch their brains to try and like actually take in new information, just kind of like just how good that is for you as a person to try and like learn new skills and like what that does for sort of like your long-term neurological health. I say this like,
more than a piece of paper. Some people, they just go to just do it, and it's like that's not the right reason either.
Yeah. Well, and I say this as somebody who like math classes in high school were fucking torture for me until I got to calculus. And then I was like, this is fun. Why did nobody tell me that this was fun?
Yeah.
So, not torture, but like, I don't know. I didn't like doing my homework.
I know math didn't come naturally to me either. I had like math tutors and stuff.
Well, and that's the other thing that I think is bullshit. And this, to just kind of pull it back into the art side of things, especially with math, I think this is actually a really good analogy. Math is something where we're kind of fed this idea that you have to be good at it, or that it has to come naturally to you, or you're just like not a math person.
Right.
And actually my day job is like a lot of like spreadsheets and shit, and trying to like explain simple numbers to coworkers. And so all of the time I'm running into these people who are like, I'm just not a numbers person. You like show up and like automatically they've got like their eyes
like a giant self-limiting belief.
And I think a lot of that kind of ties back to the same idea with art, where it's like, if it doesn't come naturally to you, then you're bad at it. And like, no, I think actually, with both math and art, there's a lot of parallels there, where you get a lot of people who potentially could be really good at something, but we prioritize this idea of like natural talent over the concept of like the work and practice that it takes to kind of get there. And we don't like to meet people where they are and say like, all right, what about this are you not understanding? How do I need to reapproach things? How do I work with like how your brain functions in this capacity? Like, how can we get you to understand? And then like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of that doesn't happen because we have this idea of like talent.
Right. Hey, I'm with you. Motivating me. So you also mentioned something earlier before we started recording that I thought was interesting, that you were in athletics as well. And personally for me, I was raised in like an athletic family, like a tennis family, I guess you could say. I was probably I'm decent, but I was.
I'm the athletics fail son also.
Yeah. Okay.
It's because I was we're all very large. As a preface, like I'm the shortest one of my siblings, and I'm like 5'10".
Yeah.
And so I was a rower in high school, but like my dad's family were rowers just because they like grew up in that area where rowing was like a thing. And like my dad was like really good when he was young. My brother also was really good. My dad was training for the Olympic team the year that they boycotted the Soviet Olympics.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So he hadn't yet gotten cut. My brother almost went to the Olympics. He didn't make the last round for the Beijing Olympics. So he went to the Worlds that year instead, in like an event that was no longer in the Olympics. So I rode varsity freshman and sophomore year of high school. And then I quit to do theater because I was like, I'm not fucking doing this in college. Fuck you guys. And then when I got to college, I was like, I made the right choice, because I would be walking to my 9 a.m. drawing studio classes, and I would be walking past the freshman girls walking back from rowing practice, and I would be like, yo, my morning sucked because I had to wake up for a 9 a.m. class, but you guys have been awake for 3 hours and exercising.
Yeah.
One of us wins.
And I'm with you. I'm the only kid who didn't get an athletic scholarship. So
but it's also, it's also funny though, because like I think there is also that like arts athlete split where like culturally you're expected not to do artistic things if you are also an athlete.
Right.
Which is also kind of horse shit, and I think fosters a lot of really bad habits, both for artists and for musicians as well, because making visual art and making music is a very physical experience. Like you are doing a lot of fine motor skills. There's like an endurance thing, especially if you are performing live. Singing is a really good example of this too. Like it's a physical thing. And because I think we have separated this stuff so entirely culturally, there's like a real disadvantage for people who aren't taking care of their bodies through exercise or like in tune with like their physical approach to things. And I've seen this obviously like with, I've got all sorts of stupid carpal tunnel issues. I know a lot of musicians who will like fuck up their shoulders or something like that, and then it'll affect the way that they can play.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a whole untapped market of like occupational and sports therapy and workouts for the artistic types that like we're told they shouldn't be exercising because that was jock shit.
Right. No, I'm with you.
So, but yeah, I mean, also like just the type of work that I do visually as well. I'm like very interested in anatomy and like how the body works. And so like until recently, I hadn't been particularly good at like maintaining an exercise habit, but now I see it as like part of my like artistic longevity. Cause like my hands hurt less if I do the right exercises.
Yeah. No, you're preaching to the choir here. Because for me, I think athletics, I don't, now it's just exercise and just trying to stay in shape. But they taught me quite a bit of discipline, and then also having a competitive spirit in a friendly way.
Yeah.
To like keep getting better. So I do compare a lot of that to being raised by like a sports family.
Yeah, and like you're talking about tennis, which is like an interestingly solitary thing, where like when you lose in tennis, it's because you lost. It's not like a team thing. There might be like a weird like ref situation, and I've seen plenty of men breaking tennis rackets on YouTube. But that was actually one of the things about rowing that I really liked, is like it was a very like personal responsibility kind of sport, where it was like, I mean, like obviously I was rowing as a high school girl, so there were moments where like, high school girl drama bullshit would like rear its head, but for the most part, as a team sport, the mentality of it was that if you lost, it was because you just didn't pull hard enough during the race, and that you wanted to like if you lost against yourself.
Right.
So
and that's a good lesson that I think kind of we both got in our own way.
Yeah. Isn't it? I never sort of thought about that as like the parallel for like more solitary sports, but it makes sense. Like a tennis as that. I wouldn't have necessarily lumped it in. I think of that as more of like a cycling and a running mentality, but tennis, because it is sort of a squash.
Yeah, either singles or doubles. But even with doubles, okay, now it's just the two of you guys. You could see the points and how they landed.
Yeah.
So anatomy, I was interested in talking a little bit about this. For me personally, I've been getting more into anatomy and some of the more like academic sides of art in the last like year and a half, and it's helped me learn a lot. Like you can learn a lot and incorporate it in different types of art forms by learning how to basically draw people in the body well. Like, have you always been interested in anatomy, and maybe what are some of the things that helped you learn it the best? Like any books or teachers?
Well, so I think it's still a work in progress for me with like learning the anatomy. I think like as far as like my arts training, I took a couple of figure drawing classes here and there, but it was always like, all right, now we're going to cram, you're going to write all of the different muscles and bones on some index cards. You're going to learn them for all of 10 minutes. And then after the like drawing exam, you're going to forget a lot of this. You might remember the word, but not where it exists in the body, like all that kind of stuff. But like anatomy on like a broader scale, I guess I've just always been interested in how bodies work. And some of that is because like I was a very curious kid who was, I could read fairly early, and my mom was a biology teacher. So there was just like always stuff in the house. Like there were like, I found her like med student, like, anatomical coloring book at one point. And I was like, this is so cool. And like one of my biggest regrets in high school was that I didn't take the anatomy course, but I didn't take the anatomy course because my mom was the only person who taught it.
Right. Yeah.
But like the biosciences were always more interesting to me. And like, if I ever got like sick, And I have like, your garden variety, like small chronic things like food allergies and whatever.
Right.
And so I was always interested in like the why and the how of that. Like when I got mono when I was a teenager, like obviously I spent a lot of it sleeping, but I also spent most of that time like Googling mono, and like figuring out like what's the deal with the Epstein-Barr virus, like how does it infect you, like what you know.
So it's just a natural curiosity.
Yeah, and like just if I don't, and actually it really manifested similarly like during the beginning of COVID. Because like when things scare me, I like try to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it felt like learning everything that I could about COVID and like how it affected the body and all of that kind of stuff was like some means of like controlling stuff in a way.
I can imagine.
Mixed success, but yeah. So then like when we're talking about like anatomy, because I've always just been interested in drawing people, I wanted to be able to like render them in a way that made sense. Because I find, and I know when you were talking to Lucas of Shoggoth Kinetics, he was talking about this a little bit as well in like a different way, where when you learn to draw, it's helpful to like learn the basics of a whole bunch of stuff so that then later on, whatever you do becomes more of like a deliberate choice.
Right.
And so for me, learning anatomy when you're talking about figure drawing falls into that camp where it's like, okay, I like, because obviously with a lot of my work, I kind of like fuck up people's anatomy a lot, but it's really important to me to have like a skeleton, pun not intended, like of like a believable anatomy at the beginning before I start to kind of like go in and mess things up, because it's it to me then means that like you're not distracted by something that's like that looks clumsy and not deliberate, and you can kind of like focus on the meat of, and like that's not to say that the anatomy ever needs to be perfect. There are plenty of like wonderful artists who like deliberately or not are not using like anatomically correct renderings of figures. It's just, I think for me, this was my way of like breaking down the problem. Plus, just like with the whole like disease thing and like how that affects bodies. I don't know. Bodies are weird and gross and very interesting.
There you go. That's your new bio right there.
Yeah, bodies are weird and gross and very interesting.
That's really fascinating. I'm kind of a new convert to anatomy and drawing people. My thing forever was like, oh, I just want to make up stuff and I never want to draw people. And then I realized just how limiting that is. So I've worked on it a lot.
And also like the ability to just kind of make stuff up. I'm not great at it. I use a lot of visual reference because I mean, like I can make stuff up, but like there are the people who can just like kind of like sit down and like draw whatever out of their head. I'm not that person. I know some people who can do that. I'm wildly jealous of people who can do that. It's not the type of skill set that I've developed. I wish it is. I wish it was, but
we always want what we don't have.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like to your point, when you're sitting down to like draw something outside of your own head, what you're drawing that comes out of your head is based on what you know. And I had a painting teacher actually in college that like was great at this, where she was talking about how like if you're going to do an abstract painting, you should find color references to like bring in so that you're like referencing deliberate colors that you found somewhere. Because what ends up happening often when you just like leave somebody to like do something abstract where they're not like working off of color references, you get the same like really boring primary color kind of composition. Like people don't pull in other stuff,
right?
I think sometimes. So that was sort of like an interesting lesson in like, oh, like if you look outside of your own head, then sometimes you're able to like bring in something that's fresh or new. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like
that's also a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, like also like the inside of your head is like your sparking point. But I don't know, all the stuff that happens in between what's here and what ends up on the paper is like, that's where the real magic happens, I think.
Totally. So I guess maybe you've answered in some way, but like, to what degree do you think your unique style is like accidental versus intentional?
It's definitely it's what it's I feel like most people, like, you can cultivate a style if you want to cultivate a style. I haven't. It's just how I draw.
You have a
Um
style.
yeah, but like it's not like a cultivated thing. It's like I draw the way that I'm interested in drawing. It's a response to the tools that I have at my disposal, how I feel like I'm drawing at that time. I'll definitely like look at other people's work to see how they solve visual problems. But and like I'll you know, like if I'm stuck on a piece or something and I'm like, all right, what goes in the background here? Like I'm going to borrow this particular pattern from, I don't know, whatever painter that I'm looking at the time, or like this like weird medieval illustration that I found or whatever. In taking that idea and then rendering it myself, because I can kind of only draw the way that I draw, and I'm not one of those like the mark isn't there atelier kind of trained people, where it's like you learn a specific style. I can only draw the way that I can draw, so I'm never really worried about ripping people off.
Right.
Because like if I'm gonna draw my own take on somebody else's idea, it's not gonna look the way that they did it, because I can't just like spit out somebody else's style. I don't know.
That's a nice perk. You can't plagiarize even if you tried.
Yeah, I mean, like you can, but you would have to be trying really hard.
Right.
And I mean, like, not, I don't know, like every other kid, I definitely did like copies of stuff that I was looking at in my sketchbook. Because you learn by like trying new things. And sometimes that's like, I'm going to copy this shit that I saw somebody else do. But it's still always in my hand. Like, there's kind of nothing I could do about that.
No, I'm with you. Do you do any like master studies currently, or have you done any in a while?
It wasn't really a part of my like arts education either, because I went to like a liberal arts school and majored in art, so it wasn't like an art school, capital A.
Right.
So I did like a master study once when I was doing a summer program, but it wasn't even like a full master study. It was like a planar study. So it was like a really stripped down, reduced version of the original piece. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing master studies, especially if you're like, you know, I want to just see how somebody else would have done this, and like see if how somebody else is approaching this problem like gives me new insight into how to approach this myself. But you know, it because I have been out of school for like 13 years at this point, and I have not gone back. And I haven't done any like continuing ed stuff. I think if I were to go to a specific type of master's program, they might like make you do kind of master studies, but that's also like very much like an older kind of way of doing kind of the academic approach to art. Like I think it's sort of fading, because that's more of like a trades kind of like,
a little more like atelier style thing.
Yeah, and I think like I know there are programs where you definitely do still do that to an extent. Like New York Academy of Art, I think you would have an opportunity to do something like that, but that's like a very specific. They're going for a very specific like student body.
Right.
And actually, like, to be clear, like a lot of my favorite contemporary artists have like come out of that program. I think they make some really like, there are some really great people who go through that program, but yeah, it is like a way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, I think too, just based on the amount of work that you're doing for bands and stuff, you also don't have a lot of spare time for studies.
Yeah. And I actually, it's something where I want to make more time to like do kind of like play in my own free time. But it's like, all right, well, if I'm sitting down, and I need to draw, it's going to need to be for a purpose.
Yeah.
If I want to actually like do stuff, if that makes sense. Like if I want to work with bands, or if I want to like do a piece that shows up in like a show, most of what I work on has to like come to a finishing point, which kind of sucks sometimes because it means there's not like, I don't know. I have been bad about like building in like study time or like sketch time or whatever into my practice, and I'm trying to pull that back in. It's just, it's hard.
Totally. With we're in February now. Do you have any like particular skills or techniques that you're trying to improve on this year?
I don't have like a sort of a specific approach to it. I want to at some point try and do stuff that's a little bit bigger, because most of my work is fairly small, just because it's how I was used to working when I didn't have a studio space. And then when I did get a studio space, the pace of like what people were asking from me started to pick up as well. So then I was like, okay, well, I still need to like limit the size of stuff in order for me to like finish anything in time. So yeah, working bigger, doing a little more painting, because just to try and like kind of figure it out. But I mean, with painting, it's also just like such a thing where it's like, okay, well, when I'm talking about painting, I'm probably talking about gouache just because of like my demands on my time, because it needs to be something where like I can come back to it after like 2 weeks away.
Right.
And it's still, so I would love to reacquaint myself with oils now that I'm not like 20. But well, pipe dream.
No, I'm with you.
It's like, yeah, it's always like because you get excited about like art stuff, and you want to like try new things. But yeah, no, I'm a total magpie in that respect, and like I would love to spend time doing stuff, but I also just don't have the time.
Oh yeah.
So I guess, I mean, like the other side of it too is like I think you're also always trying to push yourself to improve. So improvement in like the existing stuff that I've been working in, I think is also a big one for me.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. And you brought up gouache. I wanted to talk a little bit about that medium because it's extremely versatile and, I mean, in my opinion, not used as much nowadays as maybe it was in like the 70s and the 80s and stuff.
Yeah.
Just from my understanding, like, so what do you love most about gouache?
I fucking hate gouache, honestly.
Okay. Cool.
It's a really great example of something where I bought some tubes of gouache when I fucking like, I don't even remember who or why I bought a bunch of tubes of gouache. But then it was just like, it was what I had.
Okay.
I think I had some notion that like illustrators used gouache, and I had some idea at one point. I was like, I want to be an illustrator, and then I like thought about what that actually meant, and I was like, no thanks. But gouache is a really fussy medium. It requires forethought and planning that does not come naturally to me.
Okay.
It's also like, it's not super forgiving. So like, for folks that don't know, gouache is like it's an opaque version of a watercolor, basically. So whereas watercolor, like you really like water it down and you build up these layers and like washes and transparency, it's like very fluid. And also a huge pain in the ass. I hate watercolor. I respect people who can work in watercolor. It's not for me. But gouache is something where like I liked the look of like the actual paint. Like they're like, it had a cool feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a velvety kind of thing that happens with it. I don't know. I've seen other artists work with it in a way that like I'm just like, whoa. So I've been able to kind of learn a lot from them. But it's also kind of like not outdated, but it like the reason that I think a lot of people were using it kind of like 60s and 70s and 80s when you're talking about is because for commercial illustration, it photographed really well. Because it is this like flat matte kind of thing. So yeah, it's fussy. And like if you accidentally drip water on it, you get like these water spots, and I'm like really disorganized and messy. So like, you know, my like cheat approach to this has been to recently start doing stuff where like a chunk of the piece is drawn and then a chunk of the piece is painted, because it like gives me just enough to hold on to where I feel like I actually know what I'm doing, versus the painted sections where I'm like just like pants shittingly terrified the whole time.
Yeah.
There's like a 10% of like working on a painting where I'm like, oh, this is actually going really well. I really like this. And then the rest of it is just like, oh my God, why did I decide to do this? This is so ugly. Because it takes so much longer to like develop it. I think also.
There's always that ugly phase.
And the ugly phase just fucking lasts. Like you'll get like 1 or 2 moments of like the build-up phase where it's like the initial, like I just laid some stuff in there and it went really well. And then like the next day you come back and you just destroy whatever you did and it starts to look hideous. Because there'll be these like moments over the piece's development where like the unfinished nature of it actually looks beautiful and whatever. And then you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do anything to this. And then you do something and you're like, well, now I have to fix it.
Yeah. Watercolor especially is so much like that, especially if you're not having any, pen work to kind of constrain it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I can totally relate.
Yeah. Right, watercolor is thankless.
So we know the mediums you don't like for valid reasons. What do you like then?
Well, so I love working in pen and ink, honestly. And I do like, I say that I hate gouache, and yet it continues to appear in what I'm doing.
That's why I find it hysterical, because every single one's like mixed media in some way.
Yeah. Well, so, and the other thing too is like with gouache, it's also just like, it's a lot more transient. I've learned. And so like with working in gouache, I've learned a lot more about like pigments and like paint pigments than I think I kind of ever did in school. Though I'm sure my painting professor, I know that she definitely taught us more about pigments, and I know that I fucking just lost a lot of it.
Right.
Like I know that the palettes that she had us pulling for our oil classes like had pigment longevity in mind. And she would talk to you about like the pigments themselves, and like she was wild. But yeah, I definitely like learning some of that stuff as an adult, and also like watching like the painting that you have up as the background for this, the What Passes for Survival cover, like it hangs on my wall in the other room, and like you can see like I didn't put UV glass on it because why would I have? Like you can see how some of the colors have shifted over time. It's interesting, but also something where I'm like, I should probably learn to control that.
Yeah.
But
does sunlight hit it like at all?
Not really. It's just more like, it's been it's been 7 years. So, fluorescent pigments are especially transient, and I definitely used a decent number of like fluorescent pigments in some spots.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's also fun because it's like a weird, stupid science experiment. And so if you start to like learn some of the finer points of like how that kind of works, you can kind of, I don't know, the process means that you're learning more about the material.
Yeah.
In a way that's fun.
What about paper? Do you vary paper with each piece and demands, or?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is that just like practicality based on like what I have. If I'm doing just like pen and ink stuff for a t-shirt, I'll just use like a Bristol, like a smooth Bristol. I tried illustration board once for pen and ink. And if it gets wet, it just tears. But I didn't figure this out until like the very end of like working on something. Or not, like I'd like gotten far enough in that I was like, I'm not going back now. But it definitely like fought me in a way that like other surfaces hadn't. For most stuff though, I'm honestly using these like personal pieces and like finished pieces or whatever. I'm using Arch's hot press watercolor blocks because it's smooth, but it's also sort of like it's its own like self-contained drawing board. And because the paper is pre-stretched, it's less likely to kind of warp. And also at this point, I just like have a bunch of them kicking around and it's expensive paper. So I'm just going to keep using them.
Yeah, that's my paper of choice as well. For the same reasons, because you can pen on it pretty well as opposed to like full press.
Yeah. And the pen, I will say that the pen is sort of like so I don't use felt tip pens. Okay. I cannot stand microns. I know that they are like the pen of choice for a lot of people. I do not begrudge them that. It's just like the drawing implements that you work with are the ones that you like, if that makes sense. Right. Like the materials don't matter so much as like how much you enjoy using them. Like some of the best shit you're gonna ever draw is probably like a fucking ballpoint pen on like loose leaf paper. Like that's how it's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
But so like with microns, it's more like a problem that I have with felt tip pens in general. I feel like I always bend the nibs. They're not quite as like I don't have as much control over the ink quality with them. I will make a drawing underneath and then ink on top of it and then erase the drawing.
Yeah.
And so I need something that stays, and micron pens lift when you erase them. But also just at some point in high school, somebody got me one of those like shitty speedball ink nib kits.
Right.
And I liked the sensation of working with it. So I ended up like returning to that. And so at this point I'm like a pot of ink dip nib. Yeah. Cause also they're metal nibs. They're cheap. It also feels like less waste now too. Cause like a micron pen, when it runs out, you like chuck it.
Right.
So, and like this, I can like buy a box of nibs for like $10. And it's just like, if I take care of them, they last a decently long time. But also no one's teaching you how to do this usually. So there's also like a little bit of a learning curve with like how to make things work for you. Like I didn't know you had to prep pen nibs until like a couple of years ago. And I was like,
helps a lot.
It helps a fucking lot. Yeah.
That's interesting. So I didn't give dip pens an honest shake, but that is not natural to me at all. And then I do like microns. And then I'll just use a thicker one if I'm worried about like the lift. But then do you have let's show a couple material like
I don't have them handy, but it'll be like I've been using the Tachikawa and like Nico nibs more recently. Just because they're like the Tachikawa Maru mapping nib is like a really like nice, firmer, super fine detail pen. So like if we're talking about it in the realm of a micron, it's like it's at least as fine as the 0.003 that they just came out with. And so we're talking about like teeny tiny, stupid little details. But there's also something about like literally you have like a jar of ink and then you like dip it. And there's something about like the chaos and uncontrolled nature of the ink that I also like, because it kind of forces me to commit to stuff.
Right.
And also like if I drip ink on something, I then have to just
make it part of it.
Be cool with it. Yeah.
What about like brushes? Like these are good for just, kind of on the go.
So yeah, I talked to Lucas after I watched that interview. Because I do have a brush pen that I really like for on the go stuff. Because like I don't travel well with that ink. Because like the bottles, when you open them, just always leak in transit. I've like never found a way to make them not leak in transit. I don't know if this is like a me problem where I just like don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, no, there's a Pentel pocket brush pen that is a beautiful, and it's refillable, but it has actual bristles. It's like the thing that you just held up.
Yeah, I think it might actually, because this is a Pentel as well, as I thought it was.
Yeah. So the Pentel pocket, the Pentel pocket brush pen that I'm thinking of is also a Japanese pen. But it's like a black with like a cap. Like it looks more like a pen.
Okay.
But you take it off and it has like a really nice flexible set of bristles. Actually, I picked one up initially because this artist, Sam Heimer, uses it. He's one of those artists where like, if you don't know his name, you've definitely seen his work before because his stuff gets like lifted and goes viral all the time.
Sam Heimer?
Yeah, he's a big Halloween dude. You know those people where like Halloween is like their personality?
Yeah.
Sam would probably be really mad if I said that, but it's also true. And he's not doing it in this like ironic way. It just like is his vibe.
I like Halloween.
But yeah, he uses a Pentel pocket brush pen. And so that's like a good portable one. They also have a drawing pen that I have recently been using for stuff when I'm traveling, if I need to like work on an ink shirt commission kind of thing. But with both the brush pen and the like pocket travel pen, the ink in it takes longer to dry than the inks that I normally use. So I'm just like smudging the shit out of whatever I'm working on. So that's been a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
But normally I'm using like the Speedball Super Black ink just because it's cheap, it's good, and it dries fucking fast. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So I'm less likely to smudge the fuck out of my stuff.
I have two inks, but I do usually lean towards, I have it right here. I was painting this morning. But the Winsor & Newton, just India ink. This lasts me a while because I don't do exclusively that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And like I've played around with other inks. One thing I've noticed is the ones that I really like that dry super fast, I basically have to have a small container that I refill with it.
Yeah.
Because if I leave the cap off of like the basic like ink bottle, then it'll just start to evaporate. And like by the end of working on a piece, it'll clog up the finer pens and then only be suitable for like a thicker pen nib, which is weird, but you know, a thing that I have to think about. But it's like trial and error. It's just what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I'm looking at questions. I'm trying to think of what we haven't touched yet. So you've talked about it a little bit, and I think we can talk about that when we have the pieces up and stuff, in terms of like the process start to final project. So we'll save that. But I guess, what do you like best about being a artist who basically works with like heavy metal bands and just bands in general, like kind of being that avenue in terms of commissions? What do you like best about it?
So it's funny. So music's always been like obviously a very big, important thing for me. I used to sing a lot. I'm working on relearning how to do it, but I just like, music is accessible to people in a universal way that I think a lot of art is not. Like everybody listens to music. I mean, like everybody looks at art in some capacity as well, sure. But like, it's not like, I think music touches more of us on sort of like a core level than I think art is often able to do. So for me, like working with bands was always something I wanted to do it because of how much music was important to me, is important to me. So like I can't like not remember, or I can't remember a time when I didn't want to work like for music, like since considering like art as like a serious thing. Plus I think, you know, there's something about getting to work with someone who has also sort of poured their heart and soul into their artistic output. And like, so there's like a level of trust there that like, I find really intimidating, but also really moving. Where like, if I'm talking to somebody and they're like, hey, yeah, like we would love to have you work on a shirt or an album cover or whatever. I'm like, okay, wow, this person trusts what I'm doing enough to like represent what they have done. So like with like shirts and album covers, sort of like best case scenario for me, I find out that like, you know, a shirt that I've done or like an album cover that I've done is the reason that somebody might have checked something out. And then like, if they like check out something that becomes incredibly meaningful to them because they like saw an album cover and were like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What is that? Then like I'm able to facilitate a connection in a way that I think is really cool. So
no, that's awesome. Now, what do you think is maybe the worst or the hardest part?
Oh, it's terrifying also. But also like, I like for, well, so I always want it to be something that is respectful of and doesn't do a disservice to the work that the artist has put into the music.
Right.
So I want it to be, I mean, I want it to be good, but I want everything to be good. So, but I want it to be something where like they feel like it's on par with like the kind of thing that they were trying to do. Like it does also mean that like I am somewhat choosy about clients. I'm really bad at self-promotion, so I basically do not pitch people. So most people that I've worked with are people who have like in some capacity come to me, or like where I like know them on a personal level. Because also it's a small world. So and in that sense, I want to make sure that the work that I want to do will complement the music or like the artistic expression. So when people come to me, if they come to me with a specific idea that they want me to execute on, I'm probably not going to do it. And I'm probably going to be like, you should find someone else. No offense. Like, you're going to get something better out of me if I'm working on something that I'm interested in and feel invested in. So yeah, like on that level, I also, you know, I don't always listen to the bands that I'm working for. I mean, I think some of that, like any person who works in music illustration in some capacity, like you're not gonna listen to the bands that you work for all the time. But it is important to me to at least like respect where they're coming from and feel like my work is a good fit for the sound. So yeah,
It's a good answer.
Well, it's terrifying too, because like, you know, somebody has come to you with something that they've probably like poured their heart and soul into. And it's less terrifying for like a t-shirt than for like an album cover. But like for an album cover, it's like, this has to be good because it's going to be the first thing that somebody sees. And it has to match the mood. It doesn't have to match the mood in a way that you're expecting, but like it has to somehow like it's like it's not like a dialogue, but it's like there has to be a relationship between those two things.
Yeah. So how often do you interface with the bands usually in terms of the stages of the process?
So usually what'll happen is they'll reach out and I'll be like, cool. What's your timeline for this? Because I have no time and will take a while to do this. So we just need to like make sure that that's not a hurdle. And if that's not a hurdle, then like we're good.
Yeah.
And then we talk like budget and ideas. And if it's something where I don't think that I'm the right person, I will usually give them a list of other people that they should reach out to. And it's never like, I'm not usually like, yeah, this isn't a good fit for me based on whatever. It'll be like, here's what you've described you want, not really in my wheelhouse. Here's some people that I think you should talk to, or I don't have time. Here's some people you should talk to.
Right. You're trying to be as helpful as possible.
Yeah, well, yeah. But also like, you know, I'm genuinely excited about art all the time. So it's also like an opportunity for me to be like, look, like here are some people whose work I'm really stoked on. So that side of it's cool. But yeah, then they'll talk to me about sort of like what they need. I will usually request like song lyrics, or like I'll go through what their past merch has looked like or what their past album covers have looked like. If it's an album, I'll want to know what the title is, major themes as they see them for the album. And then just I'll come up with a bunch of ideas. They're usually just like fully fucking unintelligible chicken scratch sketches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll like send these like really garbage sketches, and I'm trying to be better about making them clearer. And sort of like annotate them, and then people will like kind of pick based on that. But I'm lucky in that at this point, usually people are coming to me to say like, hey, we saw this thing that you did. We would like you to do more of like what you do, but for us. And like that's the ideal state, is that somebody's like, we love what you're doing. We want you to do that, but for us.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll get people who have a specific idea. And case by case, I will sometimes say yes if I think I can do a good job at it. But if I don't think I can do a good job at it, then I'm not very good at doing the things that I don't want to do.
Right.
And I have limited time to begin with. So that side of it, like I kind of have to make sure that I sort of prioritize. And I think with bands where like you know them, it also can be like a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we'll talk about this one because you pulled it, but like the Artificial Brain t-shirt that I did, like that's like I know those dudes. So it was easier to be like, oh, okay, like this is the kind of thing that would work for them. And like I've seen their other shirts, like I know the stuff that they're working with, like that kind of stuff. So that also I was like, and also maybe I can put some stupid colors in this and you guys will be amenable. I'm like,
Yeah.
bubble gum.
It's very bold. I like it.
Yeah, thanks.
So you're talking a little bit about, you know, artists that you like and ones that you recommend and stuff. Do you have a couple in mind that you wanted to just talk about that inspired you?
That inspired me, it's like kind of everybody. I know that's a bullshit answer, also because it's not everybody, but like it's fairly varied. I guess like sort of there are like the obvious ones of like the people whose work I love, who like I've never spoken to, and then there are like the people who I've gotten to know whose work I love. So with like the sort of artists more broadly, a lot of them are definitely more like art world.
Yeah.
But like usually like kind of less trendy. I don't know. I know Lucas mentioned Christian Rex Van Minnen, which like duh. But like Jenny Saville was a big one for me. Right now also like there's a few artists working where like I will fucking go to any show that I can find of theirs. Like Hope Gangloff is one. Firulai Baez is one who like her work is just fucking stunning. Toyin Oji Odutola is another one. Hive Karaman she's an artist. I believe she's Iraqi originally, but she lives in Sweden. but she does this like crazy stuff. And she's definitely like reliably, I will go see whatever the fuck she does. Shona McAndrew, I think has a piece. I don't know. It's, and this is part of why, I know this is on your list, like the art account that I have where I post stuff. It's part of that.
Proxy for a pulse, right?
Yeah.
Just for viewers.
Yeah, exactly. And I've kind of fallen down on like reposting stuff too recently, but like, it started because I kind of have always really loved that kind of stuff, where like, you know, you just come across people and you get really excited about your work and then you want to like talk about it. And at the beginning of 2020, I had started this thing where I was like, I'm going to tweet a different artist every day that I like. And so then I managed to do it every day for 2 years without repeating anybody. Like that's a fucking impressive. Psycho. So then like, as I was going through that, I was like, oh, I can just like put this on a thing. And there's this artist, Gregory Jacobson, who's awesome. And he's also in a band in Chicago called Lovely Little Girls. They're on, I don't know if they're still on Skin Graft, but they have been on Skin Graft Records, who've put out people like Psychic Graveyard, Child Abuse, like all this like no wavy, like Weasel Waltery kind of stuff, I think sometimes. Okay. Like, I don't know if they have Ludenbachers on there, but that feels like the same kind of stuff. And Gregory has an account that he does the same thing on. And like, I'd created this like Instagram account where I was like, maybe I'll post something like art here occasionally. And I'd created the account and then never done anything with it. And then I saw Gregory start doing grilled sourdough skins, is what it's called. Okay. And I was like, oh shit, like, fuck it. I just need to do this now. Like, there's no reason for me not to. So yeah. Those are kind of like, I'm trying to think of like, I don't know. I love Sally Mann. Like, her photographs are fucking spooky and moody and wonderful.
Yeah. I think she actually had a thing at the High a couple years back.
That would make sense. She's very into like Southern Gothic kind of stuff. She's from Virginia. But yeah, I don't know, like William Kentridge, like, you know, basic big name shit. For smaller,
myself and most people watching probably don't know any of these people, so I'm like nodding my head like an idiot, but I haven't heard of most of those people you're mentioning.
I had a really good, like, the painting teacher that I had, as well as like a bunch of my other like drawing teachers and stuff, were constantly trying to get you to like look at other people. Like Rebecca Morgan is another obvious one for me. And I know that the word obvious is silly here, but like, she's also making stuff in like this crazy idiom. I don't know. It's very like R. Crumb inspired, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the artists that I started looking at, besides like, you know, people would show me the Impressionists when I was a kid, because they'd be like, oh, you were interested in art. Like, here's Impressionism, because that's like the art that we know about. Right. And then I started getting into like comic books. But like, I started getting into comic books because somebody lent me a copy of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Okay, yeah.
And then I found the first trade of Sandman in my high school's library when I was in 8th grade. Series, right? Yeah, with all the Dave McKean covers. And that kind of, like, then I was like, okay, like, I'm gonna start spending my babysitting money on trades. So I like would stumble on this like weird stuff, but I really loved like Dave McKean, and sort of like the chaos of like the collage work and like mixed media approach to stuff. Like he did a Arkham Asylum with Grant Morrison. That's like that like changed me in high school, like in a good way. It's like a Batman story, but it's like a Batman story that intersects with like just discussions of mental. It's like, you know, who's the real crazy one kind of vibe, but like it was weirdly sort of like an intersection with a lot of more of like the medical shit I was interested in. So like medical and like history shit.
Yeah.
But
well, I have some homework and research to do, apparently. You should rattle
yeah.
I have nothing to rewatch and look up some of those.
Well, but I mean, like also when you're talking about like contemporary folks that are also doing stuff, at least vaguely in the same space, like
Right.
it's also just like a total embarrassment of riches. There are like so many people doing different things. And like I will say that like there are definitely trends. So like, you know, everybody knows who Mark Riddick is. Right. Not everybody, but like within this general milieu, Mark Riddick is like a fairly known name. But also that means like there are so many people just like trying to do what Riddick is doing, and not doing it half as well. And so you get a lot of kind of like sameness. So the folks that I'm like really drawn to are people who are doing stuff where I see it and I'm like, oh, I know who this is. So like Lucas, obviously, Shagath Kinetics, but also Karmazid, if you're familiar. Yeah, Karmazid.
Yeah, from the guy. I was talking with him the other day.
Yeah, no, he's lovely. Ethan McCarthy, the Hell Simulation. He's in Primitive Man, Vermin Womb, all this other stuff, but he has like a collage practice that's like very like intense. And collage is something that I don't fully fucking understand.
Yeah, me neither.
But he has that. But it's, and then like I mean Alex Ekman Lawn is like an obvious one. He's like one of my favorite dudes also like as a human being. And like fucking nobody is making shit that looks like Alex, except for like the handful of people who have once in a while tried to rip him off and then immediately gotten called out because like you're literally just doing what he was doing. And he does these like crazy like layered cut paper collages. But he also like his sense of color is fucking wild. And like he's somebody where if you saw one of his pieces, you'd be like, I have seen that before.
Are there any particular bands that might help out?
He's done a lot of stuff for Imperial Triumphant recently, but it's more like in the Imperial Triumphant idiom and less his own kind of stuff. But he's also done some stuff for Inner Arma. He's done some stuff for Pyrrhon. He has done work for Nero de Marte, the Italian band. Yeah, he's done most of their album covers, I think.
Okay, I can place it then.
He's also done shit. He's done so fucking much, and I feel really bad that I can't like remember offhand what all of it is. But like, it's fun. Like the man just like does not stop working. He also did a cover for this book, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And like that was one of those things where I was just like so pumped because the book itself is also like deeply fucked up and like incredible. And so like you're gonna cry but also cringe, and like it's like this sort of poetic like dreamlike memoir of an abusive relationship. And just like, you know, when you see like your pals like work associated with something that's also really fucking cool. It was cool.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, I don't know. And then like just there are so many fucking people. I mean, Ellie Jo Livingston is primarily a tattoo artist, but she also does a lot of illustration. And she's done stuff for like Artificial Brain, Inner Arma, and like a bunch of other bands. But she's mostly working in tattoo. But she's got this like beautiful like vintage illustration kind of style. Yeah, she's done some like cool RPG stuff.
That sounds up my alley. I take a lot of inspiration from tattoo art of all different kinds. It's a hobby of mine in terms of learning the history and all the different styles. So
yeah, well, and her stuff just doesn't look like anybody else's. Like, you know immediately whose it is. I don't know, like there was the sort of standard stuff with like Chris Taylor. He's done a bunch of stuff for like Pig Destroyer. He's in Page 99.
Okay.
He's done some stuff for like Portrayal of Guilt, and I want to say that he did something for Thou, but I can't remember. Brandon Gertz is another person who's like, I don't understand how his brain works, but it's wonderful. Like no one's making, like, you know what his stuff looks like instantly. He did the last Yacha full length cover.
Oh yes, yeah, that was a really cool painting.
It's really striking. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where like I can kind of go on and on and on and on and on.
No, that's great.
Oh, Allison Summers.
Allison Summers?
Yes. So when I was talking about gouache, Allison works in gouache, and Allison's work is one of those things too, where when I was really struggling with gouache, I just like went back through Allison's Instagram account and was like, all right, I just want to see how you're doing this. Like, I can't paint the way that you can, but like, I can at least get some materials tips out of like how you're doing this. So their work is fucking wild. They're like an all-time fave.
I think I've definitely heard Allison Summers' name, but I can't place the artwork right off the top of my head.
Doesn't do a lot of work with bands, which honestly shocks me because like more people should just license her work because it's fucking insane. Like that's one of the things that I think people don't often do is like licensing work. Right. Like if you see a painting that's like very sick and you like it, you can sometimes approach the artist and be like, hey, we love this painting that you did. Would you be amenable to licensing it for an album cover?
Yeah, it's cheaper that way. Usually. Well, it depends on
everybody's getting underpaid.
Yes, but if you're doing a commission for a particular band versus licensing something you've already made, you think it should be the same price?
You did the work.
Okay.
And the way that it works in that instance too, it's like, look, I already put in the work. You like this enough that you want to put it on something and you're going to be using it as a promotional thing. Like, just fucking pay the person. I mean, like, it's also not like you're going to be paying them a ton anyway. Yeah. You know, like I know what Adam Burke licenses this shit for. Like he'll like post the license available.
Yeah, it's definitely lower than it needs to be. That's for sure.
Yeah, and like I don't know. I was talking to somebody at one point about like how to price stuff for bands. And like the reality of it is that like you know, most bands aren't making a comfortable living at all, but also like, you know, people are willing to pay for, you know, a whole bunch of stuff to accompany an album. You might want to pay for the thing that's going to be the first fucking thing people see.
Right.
Like, is it, okay, not to like get into like how important things are as far as like the relative importance of like the music itself versus the image that it goes with. Like, obviously, like the music is the thing that like is the product, but like if you respect the music, put some effort into the way that it's packaged, because that is how people encounter you for the first time in some capacity. I mean, like maybe not with like algorithmic streaming recommendations and stuff, insofar as like stuff will just kind of play or autoplay or whatever, but it is still, you know, like the art is still displayed.
Well, in metal, it probably matters even a little bit more than other genres, just because there's such a, I mean, look, like
there's still a culture of it. Yeah.
You know,
there's still a culture of it, but also like you pay attention to it too, though. So you also know that as much as there is a culture of like caring about the visual component of it, it is also often still kind of more conservative than you would expect. And so far as like a lot of stuff kind of still looks very samey. Like I'll sort of jokingly refer to a lot of stuff as like the skulls and titties kind of area, where it's like, all right, this is just like a skulls and titties like band, which like nothing wrong with that, but like it's boring.
Yeah.
You're gonna do skulls and titties, at least like bring something fresh to it, you know.
Now I just want to form a band called Skulls and Titties, just to, you know.
Honestly, I'd be surprised. Maybe there might already be, but
yeah.
I don't know, that would be a really good like lady focused noise rock band. Call themselves Skulls and Titties. I mean,
There
maybe
you go.
not. That would be terrible.
You're getting back into singing.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pigeonholing yourself, but yeah.
Well, it's clear you have a ton of passion, and you're a true art nerd, that's for sure. And I hope you take that as a compliment, because the amount of like understanding and care you have, and just loving other people's work, I really admire that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a nerd. A nerd. Full stop.
I'm with you. You want to pull some of these pieces up and talk about them?
Yeah. Let's check them out.
See if I can do this right. Oh, there we go.
Hell yeah. Cool. This one I think is actually like a good starting point too, just thematically, because the working relationship that I have with Pyrrhon is obviously like fairly unique. Just on account of like, Doug and I have lived together since we graduated from college, but we started dating when we were like college sophomores. So,
nice.
Like I get to see a lot of this band as they're sort of like working through ideas. So, and vice versa. Like, so because Doug lives with me, he's like seeing kind of what I'm like riffing on or whatever.
Right.
So when we were talking about like the ideas for this album cover, he kind of like, I actually remember this because I was traveling for somebody's wedding, and he was like texting me ideas while I was like in my friend's basement where I was couch crashing. And I was like, this is weird because you're describing to me an idea that I had sort of been thinking of and wanting to find a way to do. And so he'd come to me with sort of the central idea of like a dog that had sort of been cornered, and like kind of fighting back in a way, but like sort of like a kind of an ambiguous kind of thing. But they had an album title also. So that sort of informed a lot of like the choices here as well. So, you know, What Passes for Survival, I think as an album title has a lot of richness in like the phrase. Because, and so I tried to reflect that with the actual image itself. Like, this is not an image where, you know, you could say that whoever this is thriving.
Right.
And actually, I would say the survival element of this is very much in doubt. Like, you know, what passes for survival is kind of like the I don't know, I thought that was like a very rich kind of idea as well, because, you know, especially when you're talking about trauma, both physical and mental, you know, surviving something is often kind of like a fraught concept, because sometimes something will irrevocably change you. But also in this particular instance, I just kind of liked the idea of putting in an image where it's like, is this creature's immediate existence is like very much visibly in threat. Like, this is, you know, and I look at a lot of reference imagery for work that I do.
Yeah, I was curious what you used for this.
This one sucked. I have a fairly strong stomach for fucked up images, but for this, I was looking at like images of dogs that were just like probably like moments from death. It was like really difficult to look at.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a bunch of those things. The background also, like at some point, I think I posted like a stage by stage version of this, but the background is like this very layered thing where it started one way, and then I just kind of like pulled a whole bunch of layers on top of it, in a way that was deeply inefficient as a working process. But I liked that then like pieces of it would peek through. So it started as this like horrible like 1970s garish yellow and purple pattern in the back. And then I just kind of layered a whole bunch of stuff on top of it. So you could still see it kind of coming through in places. But it really became kind of this layered, dense, obscure kind of thing. So definitely just kind of looking for like the feeling of overwhelm but also like a kind of vibrancy.
In terms of materials, what did you use?
So this is a combination of gouache and ink and marker, actually, I think. No, yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's 2014, right, or something?
Yeah, this was 2014. I did it in this apartment, actually. No, this was 2017. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 2014 was when the Mother of Virtues came out.
Oh, yes.
This is 2017. Yeah, I have these liquid concentrated watercolors that I don't really know how to use them properly, but they do fun things, and the pigments are really strong, and they split in funny ways.
Dr. pH
So,
ones?
Yeah. They do really fun and weird shit, and I'm not using them the way that they're supposed to be used, and I don't care. Yeah. Some of the pigments, like, they really will split in funny and gross ways, because it's not like a pure chroma. It'll be like different pigments kind of swirled around, mixing them, and then when they split, you get like pieces that are like a little bit more yellow versus a little bit more green versus brown or whatever. And I find that really cool. I did use microns on part of this, but with the understanding that I was murdering them, because the gouache pigment actually clogs up the nib and you stop being able to use it. So I used it for some of the kudzu texture in the background. But yeah, I definitely, this was one where I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do with gouache for this.
So if I may, because I just have a couple comments on them. So what I love about this one is the lighting and the values. I feel like it points the eye in a really nice way, and it definitely has an unsettling tone. I also like that the animal there is, you mentioned ambiguous. I was kind of feeling the same way in a cool way. It's like, I mean, it's a dog, but you don't see an emaciated dog very often. So I do really like that aspect too. It makes it even more disturbing. And
thanks.
I think just, all the different textures, but because of those values and the light source, it's not overwhelming for the eyes. So really good choices.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that I'll do when I'm working on pretty much anything, I repeatedly photograph my progress. Partially because also, like, when you see something on a smaller screen, it can tell you, reveal problems really fast, where you're like, I don't know why this isn't working. And then you look at it on your phone and you're like, oh, that's why.
I do the same thing. It's a really good tip.
Well, I had a professor who used to be like, yeah, like when you're stuck with something, make sure that you take a break. You like put it on the other end of the room, walk away, don't look at it for a second and then turn around, or like look at it upside down, see if it's still working, that kind of thing. So with this one too, there was like an element of in the previous, all the previous like Pyrrhon stuff has sort of this like mandala-esque shape to the composition. So kind of like keeping like a sort of rounded space in there was kind of important, just as like a visual motif. But also I think that kind of helps create like a nice composition for something that has to work small.
Right.
Because ultimately all of the stuff has to work small just because of the way that we consume visual like media that accompanies albums. Like it has to show up as a thumbnail on whatever fucking streaming service you're using, or like in like on your phone for like the Instagram ads or like posts or whatever about it. So
how big is the original roughly?
It's like 12 inches tall by about 16 across, so 14 across maybe. It's like I'll make them basically roughly the actual size of an LP cover, because it's easier to scan them that way, but it's also like it's more, I know that like I'm kind of seeing it at the size that it'll be reproduced.
Right. No, that's really smart.
I would love to go bigger. I just also don't know how to like scan shit at that size without like really sacrificing a lot. I don't have like a giant scanner.
Well, neither does Lucas. I don't know if you saw that part of the interview. That cracked me up.
Oh, I scan and stitch.
Yeah.
I got myself a nicer scanner because, but like still a consumer grade scanner, because the colors on a CanoScan, it just eats reds. Like the colors are terrible. So I got an Epson like desktop scanner that lives in my studio, because I just like, I couldn't keep, I used to actually just scan stuff at work, honestly, because they had a really nice big scanner.
Yeah.
But then my job moved offices and like the big giant scanner disappeared somewhere. Which makes me really sad, because it's like a fucking $3,000 scanner and someone fucking lost it, but whatever.
That's a bummer. Well, shall we go to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So we have a recent release by Moontooth, Phototroph.
So this one was actually kind of not a full exception to the image rule, where like I tend not to like when people come to me with an image.
Right.
John of Moontooth hit me up and was like, we have this idea, we've been talking about it, you're the one artist that like really makes sense for this, which like also like what an appeal to my own vanity in the pitch. But like he described it and I was like, no, I actually think I could do that. And basically they were talking about like an above and below sort of duality, with like a hand above some water. I don't actually remember if water was entered into this even, but it was sort of this like kind of like a face card.
So did they send you like a sketch or just described it?
I think John actually did send me like a crudely drawn sketch via a text, but like I don't think we ended up close to that, because like initially I think they were talking about like knives too, and I was like, nah. But they were like super open to it. But the rendering style itself was something I'd started toying with in a personal piece and really, really loved the effect of. Where it's sort of this hybrid of like tightly rendered ink drawing and then like looser painting. So the top half is all gouache. There are definitely things in this where I consider them sort of like a creative solution to my own technical rendering limitations. Like I kind of hated how the clouds were originally kind of sitting. And so I was like, you know what, let's give them some weird line art texture.
Right.
I didn't think I was going to be able to draw an interesting, compelling landscape. So I decided I was going to make it sort of this weird, nebulous, unreal kind of thing. Like if you zoom in on parts of this at various points, like not that you should right now, because I don't know that you have the capacity in the presentation software, but
I can't, unfortunately.
Like the sort of green horizon in the background is sort of this like slightly flat texture that I then put in like vine patterns into.
Okay, so it's not a like, literal landscape. Then there's like a
it's like, I mean, it's like a made up landscape. They'd sort of talked, because there's a song on the album about it's called like Nymphaceae or something like that, and it's like a species of water plant. So they were talking about like a lotus, and I was like, there's a version of this, like a nice white water lily kind of thing that is like native to where these dudes are from, that I thought would be sort of an interesting play. So this is sort of like I looked at a lot of like Long Island marshes, like New York marshes, and was like, all right, how's this gonna play out? A lot of like botanical illustrations of specific types of water lilies, because I'll often kind of take this as like an opportunity to go down a bunch of Google rabbit holes, like Wikipedia rabbit holes. Partly like it's like partly a procrastination tool, because I'm like shit scared of starting something, but also it's because that way, like in the investigation process, sometimes I find stuff that then like makes me think like, oh, this is a cool idea. Let's pull this in. So with this, like the root structure for lily pads, I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite pieces. The hand pulling the roots at the bottom there, I think was an excellent touch. And then I also like the decision to have that the basically like the brown kind of ground on that bottom piece right there, instead of it just being half and half. It kind of gets some visual interest that I liked.
Yeah, I think I basically was just like, I have a bottle of walnut ink that's been sitting here and I like what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I think I sort of threw that in impulsively.
This is a really cool piece.
Thanks.
You got anything else to say on this one?
The dudes were super sweet about it. So like the whole process of working with them was actually pretty nice. And they're not people that I really know well. So it was nice to like kind of encounter them through that avenue. So
roughly
and it was cool to
long,
oh god, months.
Yeah.
But it's like months of like chipping away at stuff.
Yeah.
But I think I finished this in like summer of 2021.
Okay.
Vinyl release schedules being what they are. So yeah, but yeah, it was a cool process because like, you know, you kind of then like sit on it for a while and then like when it comes out, it's interesting to like see people's response to it. And it was, you know, it was also nice to see that like people seem to really connect with the record. Like
it got very favorable reviews.
Yeah, this is Snapple Fact, the only thing I've worked on that's ever made the Billboard charts.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they charted, which was really cool.
All right. Now, these are two personal pieces. Yeah. I absolutely love these. I wanted you to talk about them.
Well, so it's funny. The piece on the right is actually the piece that made me want to do this like hybrid drawing, painting kind of approach. So that was actually the piece that I had in mind when I approached the Moontooth composition. So this like sort of tightly rendered versus also like sort of painted stuff.
Oh yeah.
Partly as a crutch because I'm like, all right, I don't feel confident in my painting abilities or skills or chops or whatever. So I don't want this to be entirely painted because I don't think I can rely on how I paint to successfully get this over the finish line. But there's something also in kind of like the patchworky kind of way that they sit together that I really like. It unlocked some stuff for me. I don't know, with the one on the right and the one on the left, it's funny seeing them next to each other because the one on the left is probably like the personal piece that I completed most recently. And there's a lot of similarity here that like I don't think necessarily I wouldn't have necessarily put them next to each other, but there's totally like a through line. But in both instances, like obviously the one on the left, it has like more of like a developed world that it sits in, whereas the one on the right is a little bit more like it's sort of like untethered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. When I was working on the one on the right, it was sort of like a last ditch thing before a show that I had that was like a 3-person show in Long Beach in February of 2020. And so this was like, all right, I just want to like do one more thing for this. I finished this in like maybe December of 2019. And a lot of the stuff that I do like for personal work is really more about trying to evoke just like a feeling. So like while I was working on the one on the right, in my head, I was like, I want people to be able to feel this in like their sternum, like just like it. I want it to just like sit here uncomfortably when they look at it. And it was actually based on, the composition was sort of based on some reference photos that I had taken at one point for a split release that never happened. That I was like, you know what, I actually really like this idea. And I think that there's a lot of space for it to kind of grow. But yeah. And then the one on the left is sort of like a continuation of a recent kind of, I've been jokingly calling it rot cocoa because I can't take anything seriously. but I had this idea a cajillion years ago, and like it's just kind of been sitting and percolating in the back of my head. Um, and I'd never really like pulled the trigger on doing it. But it was just like, sort of like creating these like intense kind of claustrophobic Rococo-esque gardens, but like out of weird severed body parts and organs and stuff like that. So I was like, sure, fuck it, let's just headlong into that. So I've been kind of playing in that space for a while. But I think in both, there's very much like a sense of like threat and anxiety and disquiet, but also sort of like a, I don't know, it's kind of like a powerful thing as well. I end up working with a lot of self-portraiture, partially because I am my own most convenient model.
Right. I guess.
And I'm trying to fix that, because to me it feels like a deficiency, but at the same time, with a lot of like the emotion that I'm trying to pull into pieces like this, it's very unpleasant. And it feels like very, it feels very like presumptive and like a sort of like a violation to like impose this shit on other people, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Even though like if I am talking to somebody and I'm like, would you maybe model for me? Like they know me at this point, they know what my stuff looks like. So it's not like there is a permissiveness to it, but it's also like, it's like, it feels weird to try and put that ugliness on someone else.
That makes a lot of sense.
But also I feel like I need to at this point, like, just because I'm sort of like, yeah, I part of it too is like when you're taking, I take a lot of reference photos.
Right.
And so if I'm taking a reference photo, half the time I don't totally know what I'm going for. So I try and like physically kind of manifest a sort of a variety of awkward positions and emotions and stuff like that. And then I'll sort of like cull through them later. And the process of working with a model is very different because it's like, how do you direct someone? And I've talked to one of my friends about this where I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Cause like, how do I tell somebody to make their neck look sadder? Like some people understand what that means, but like, I don't know. It's still very much like it's sort of rooted in like a weird shyness where like, yeah. I'm simultaneously not shy and like deeply shy. So asking other people to do stuff for me always, like it takes a lot of like personal wind up. If that makes sense.
No, totally. Thank you for sharing. I imagine probably amongst all these pieces, having your personal work up here is probably the most uncomfortable for you.
It is, but it is ish, but it's also like it's kind of fun because the personal work is often the stuff that I'm like proudest of.
Right.
Because it's mine, you know, like it is very much like my own. This is a thing that I'm creating because I want to make it. The stuff that I do for bands, it's like there is definitely a very like different and also intense emotional component to that because there's sort of like that layer of trust. And like once in a while I will have something where somebody's like, yeah, let's just like do what you want to do. But even then I feel like it still needs to like match the energy. So I definitely have some stuff where it feels more like personal work, but it's been done for bands. But like the stuff that's sort of purely personal, it's weird because I mean, like the self-portraiture angle of it too is also like very much uncomfortable in some ways. Right. But also it like, Rebecca Morgan is a great person when it comes to talking about this, where she's like, you know, especially from like a feminist perspective, the male gaze just dictates how you're perceived. This is an easy way of for you to like take it back. This is a way for you to control how your body is used and perceived. And I do think that with a lot of the personal work, there is some element of it where like you see it and you're like, yeah, there's no way a dude drew that. Not because of like anything in particular. I'm not saying like a guy couldn't draw something nuanced or sensitive or something like that. Like it's certainly not what I'm saying, but like I feel like there is something in the way that the figures are rendered here that like feels like it comes very much from a non-cis dude perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if I saw these, I would expect that they were probably not painted by a cis dude. So I see what you're saying. The one on the right, that background, then was that kind of like a wet on wet technique, or like how was that created? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's just like pretty washy. Basically, I had a gouache color that I kind of got a little obsessed with, and I created like a little like washy, like I just toned a paper, because you know how like sometimes you'll work off of a toned paper where you it's like a middle ground and you'll put in the darks and then bring out the lights.
Yeah.
I thought that some of my black and white stuff was getting a little stale. Not stale, but like I wanted there to be something else to it. So I'd started toning some paper. So that was sort of like an initial washy kind of tone between some perylene pigments. And then I just like, I felt like it needed just a little bit of texture and depth. So I started adding sort of those veiny textures, that sort of weird black mold kind of texture.
I love that.
Thank you. That's
that particular
also in the perylene color family. It was one of those things where basically I like picked up 3 tubes of paint at some point and then got a little bit like obsessed with the pigment itself. But so there's something satisfying about like the materials side of it.
Yeah.
So.
And then the one on the left, what just I loved about it was just all the different texture usage.
Thanks. Yeah, with that one, it's similarly on like a toned piece of paper, but I've started exploring like more transparent washes with inks and actually those P.H. Martin watercolors, because you can dilute them really well. And so, but one of the other things that I've sort of started to enjoy doing is like pulling out like the lights in this. I don't know. It's just sort of like tooling around with like texture and form, and obviously like it serves like a bigger end or whatever, but sometimes I think that people don't necessarily add like the joy to
joy like honking.
Yeah, well, that's gonna happen all the time on the street. But like, you know, I think people sometimes are so focused on like the meaning of something that they forget to also enjoy like the actual textures and stuff like that might go into something. And like, you know, there will be symbolic meanings to stuff, sure, but like also I think we kind of undervalue the because it feels good subconscious kind of motivations for things that end up working really well. Like you kind of have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's a really good point. All right, so this one deeply disturbed me. I'm curious to see what you have to say about it.
So this is a big old festering sore. This is probably the gouache painting I am simultaneously most proud of and most afraid to watch age, because there's a lot of pigment in here that I know is a little bit more transient. But I definitely also like learned the most about how I needed to render with gouache on this. But yeah, I mean, the band is called Weeping Sores. So this is another one of my partner's bands. This is sort of like his primary songwriting project for himself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, like it's got other people in it who like bring a lot to the table, I think. But initially this is sort of like his project where he was kind of doing like a bedroom death doom thing, which is not really what it's become at this point. But we wanted like a kind of very literal interpretation. But also I liked sort of like the flattening element of like how this worked. So like you look at it for a second, you kind of don't remember what it is.
Right.
And then in what it is hits you in the face a little bit. So there was like a lot of like, honestly, like joy in creating this in terms of like figuring out like exactly how the colors would work and like how to kind of really like turn up some of the like disgusting variations of colors that you get in like a healing.
Yeah, those little green kind of things they add another. That to me, that's the dialed up. It's like you just had to do that, huh?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That, and I like there's some like bright pink things at the edges of the wound. Because like if you've ever had like a really like nasty cut, even if it's, Lord hopes that it's never on this level, but like even if it's like healing, sometimes the area around it will get a little bit pink. Because your body is like working really hard, so it's a little inflamed. And I thought it was really sort of fun to kind of pull that in. But I also was like definitely with some of these just pulling in colors that like they're not that far off from what. For the process for this one too, I did a lot of searching of different types of medical conditions that would potentially give you something like this. Because like just searching for like festering open wounds and stuff like that is not the most fruitful reference image search.
Okay.
And so I figured out pretty quickly that there's like a sort of, you want to kind of set up guide rails so that you can kind of get the types of images that you're looking for and then kind of stitch them together. Because this isn't drawn from any one thing. It's just sort of like an amalgamation of disgusting open wounds that I found. But a lot of them were also ones that were caused by autoimmune disorders, which I thought of like adding sort of an interesting layer to it as well. Because like on some level, the body was doing this to itself. So more of like the medical nerd bullshit.
Yeah, I have a pretty queasy stomach, so I can't handle this stuff that well. What I do love about this one is the right side and the left side have different stroke kind of patterns. Like I love on the left side that there's these diagonal strokes that have a little bit of motion to them, and on the right side it kind of has those veiny kind of branching out things. So it's really cool that there's variation within it.
Yeah, putting in the hairs, all of a sudden I was like, what if there were some hairs here? That would be really, really gross.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's definitely work where I just like indulge how gross things can get, and it's fun. Especially when like with the Moontooth piece, that's one where it was like, all right, there is no body horror here, none whatsoever. So I think I was definitely working on something in parallel where I was like, let's just add some toenails.
Oh god.
Like, so like, yeah, just having balance. So yeah, but this one was like probably the most like forethought as far as like the gouache execution.
Yeah. Cool. And we'll bring it home with some t-shirt illustrations.
Nice. It's funny to me that you picked these two also. Not like funny bad, but more like I'm always interested to see like what people gravitate.
Artificial Brain was top of my mind because this was actually at the merch booth and I was close to buying it, but I didn't. Sorry, I just was tight on money that night. But yeah, I loved
they have this online if you ever change your mind.
Yeah, it's a nice one. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean with this one it was just like partially that I like knew the guys. And so I had a really good sense of like what their sound was like. They actually did like an extended tour in 2014 with Pyrrhon. So like we've known them forever. And I was just like talking to Sam, the bassist, one night, and I was like this one actually was one where I was like, I would love to do a shirt for you guys. And I like don't do that usually. Like the number of people that I've actually said that to, I probably count on one hand. But so yeah, so then they had some touring coming up, and so they needed a shirt, and I was like, cool, this is a good opportunity. So I finished this in like, I want to say like September 2021.
Okay.
I think they had it at like some tour dates that fall. But yeah, it's the colors were definitely very silly. And I had a lot of fun with them. But yeah.
Is this you as a reference as well?
No, this is someone that I went to school with who's an
Okay.
actor, and I've also always thought that they had a really compelling face, because they had this sort of like now I'm like Charles Vess kind of fey fairy tale face, like they look like a member of like the Fae. And I was like, I always wanted to draw their face. Let me see if they'll let me borrow their face for this. So, but yeah, that was an easy one also, because I was like, this doesn't need to be complicated reference photo for you, and you're an actor, so like you can give me range.
Right. Nice.
So I do need to like actually follow up and like use them again, because they were great, very expressive. Perfect. Maybe that's a good avenue.
The eyes pop out really nicely.
Thanks. But yeah, and then I guess like just knowing kind of their whole, like they've sort of stumbled into like the accidental like space horror kind of vibe. So I think I was thinking of like fuck, I'm blanking on the name of the character, but the android in Alien, and like the weird like milky. Did you ever see Alien, like the classic horror movie?
Yeah, you're talking about the android that Sigourney Weaver gets in and fights him?
No, that's Aliens.
Oh, okay.
That's the exosuit kind of like thing.
Oh, yeah.
The android in the first one is like he's the evil robot who like gets decapitated at one point. It has like the weird like fluids. But I think I was also thinking about like Battlestar Galactica had these like oracles.
Okay.
Just like oracle that was like a Cylon. And, like, I don't know. Again, nerd shit. There's like I think I was also thinking of like the Oracle in Battlestar Galactica as well.
I haven't seen that in a minute.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, just some space robots.
And then Pig Destroyer here.
So it's funny, that's another exception to my idea rule, but I didn't really know these dudes very well. And so Blake came to me with like a specific idea, and it was like he'd seen some drawing while he was on vacation that was like a woman with an octopus on her head, and I was like, I mean, yes, I guess I can do that, but also like I'm gonna have to make sure that this isn't like somehow like hentai adjacent. So yeah, this was kind of my solution to that. But it was actually kind of a lot of fun to draw.
Yeah.
Though the texture of octopus skin is fucking brutal.
Oh, okay.
And the number of fucking tentacle suckers. Like
yeah.
I wanted to throw my pen across the room half the time. But like once you get into a rhythm for it, it's like it's a lot easier, but like definitely is yeah, the gigantic octopus skin texture is a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You have some areas though that's really nice, like the skin, where there's not texture, so it bounces it out, which is cool.
Yeah, I need to get better at doing that, because I've definitely kind of started to jam stuff into every crevice now of like a drawing, and I need to like remember to like pare it back sometimes.
I just love that this idea came from him just like on vacation. Like I love to.
Yeah, he literally just sent me like a picture. Yeah. He like literally just sent me a picture of some like, it was like an ad with an illustration in it or something, and I was like, well, I'm not doing that, but like this at least makes sense. Like I can definitely do something with this idea that I think will be cool. So yeah.
Well, nice. Anything else on your mind before we start wrapping up?
I don't know. I appreciate the opportunity, man. It's been nice chatting. So
yeah, likewise.
Any lingering questions, burning questions?
Let's see. I mean, you're definitely open to sharing, so that's been great.
Yeah, filter. I don't really. I never really came with a filter. It's a little bit.
No, it's fine. Okay, well, I like asking this to kind of wrap up, but what would be your one piece of advice for someone who wants to create art in the music and metal scene?
It sucks because it's actually kind of like a who you know game. But everything kind of is. And I think it's like being excited about what you're doing, but also being excited about kind of like getting better and learning and like pushing yourself is, I think, really important. Because I think especially like within metal, like there are a lot of people who are doing the same shit as each other. And it's fine. Like there's a market for that. You don't need to like reinvent anything all the time. But I think making sure that you're doing stuff that like feels authentic to you is important, and it's going to make you more interesting.
Right.
Like no one needs 19 pus head clones. Like we've got enough of them. I mean, we had, original pus head. Like you don't need more. But like, I think being humble and learning and stuff like that is important, but being better at self-promotion than I am is also important. But yeah, just like going to shows, like getting stoked on other people's stuff. It's not a big world. So just don't be an asshole. Don't be arrogant. Don't be an asshole.
I like that. And I think throughout this interview too, the thing that kind of really stuck with me that I really like of what you said is, really embrace your authentic style and don't try to be like other artists who maybe are getting work just because it's like a little bit more typical, skulls and
skulls
and
and
stuff like and titties. Yes. But like, that'll stick with me. I like that a lot. Stick to your guns.
Yeah. I mean, like on some level, yeah, stick to your guns. But on other levels, like you have to be humble and understand like that I don't know, if the point at which you think that there's nothing left to improve in your work, like just fucking quit. Because there's always something you can be doing better. Mm-hmm. And if you